expected a lot more to happen yesterday, it has to be said, but nothing did. The one thing that did come to light, though, was some quite interesting information about the Lucas Paqueta situation. Now, I said yesterday I thought I was sort of 50-50 whether this transfer would happen. West Ham are caught between a rock and a hard place with this transfer, really, because ideally they'd like to keep him, but they also know full well that Manchester City want him. But I think there's an interesting development with Manchester City, and that's because we've already done or attempted to do business with Manchester City twice during this current transfer window. Of course, if you remember, there was that little bit of an auction with Manchester City fighting it out with Arsenal to get the signature of Declan Rice. In fact, it was really City who prompted, I think, Arsenal's third and final bid. City's last one was 80-odd million or something like that. We'll never know exactly what the short change was. But as soon as Arsenal came in with their winning bid, which was obviously 100 million paid over in just under 2 years with 5 million on top in add-ons, Man City said, that's it, we're done, we're out, we don't want any more of this. So we've got recent example of Manchester City being interested in one of our players, but certainly getting to the point where they thought they're not going to pay any more. They're not going to pay above what they perceive to be the going rate. This is something actually Newcastle have been doing recently. They've been, I think, at pains to suggest that they are not going to pay over the odds for the players. It's been very much a case of, no, you come here, you join for the project. And I think you've probably got to do that to offset a lot of people's expectations, because once people know that you are awash with oil wealth and you have got unlimited resources, it's not just millions, it's billions, people are going to come and they're going to try and take the mickey and take you for a ride. So I think it's important for those clubs to let everybody else know, look, just because we're Man City, just because we're Newcastle, just because we got Saudi or Abu Dhabi oil wealth or whatever it may be, we're not going to pay above the going rate for these players. And I just worry a little bit if it gets to a situation with Paqueta that we may well find ourselves pricing ourselves out of a deal. The one comfort blanket that you got with that is we get to keep Lucas Paqueta. And I do think the longer this goes on, I think we'd still have a reasonably motivated player on our hands. Yes, he'd be disappointed, but he's not going to throw a strop. I really like the fact that he's been at pains to point out via his representatives that he's not going to kick off. And that's really good. I think in this day and age, it's really important that you get that. If you know the guy at Leeds, Italian left winger, Wilfred Gnonto, I believe his name is, good player. Actually, somebody I would ideally have liked at West Ham. It seems like he might have down tools in order to get a transfer. I sort of understand why he would want to leave, because he's seen sort of everybody else leaving Leeds, isn't he? But I just don't think it's the thing you do. It's not the right attitude. You can't really have any genuine complaints if a player does that to your club if you've signed them knowing that they're capable of that. It's sort of the same as the old Marko Arnautovic situation, is it? Did he treat us in a bad way? Yes, he did, but he'd already done that before at Stoke, so there should really have been no surprise that Arnautovic was capable of basically turning his back on a club and insisting on a transfer and forcing a transfer. We knew about him. We knew about the situation with his brother, and there couldn't have been really too many surprises. So whilst I would like Gnonto as a player, I think, in terms of his character and his personality, don't be surprised if whoever signs him gets the same sort of thing happen, particularly if he performs well, he'll want to move on again. I think when you sign a player like Paqueta, clearly, got a little bit more about him in terms of, his loyalty and whatnot, and his professionalism. Not even loyalty, it's professionalism, isn't it? And if he's going to carry on playing for West Ham and trying his best, then, look, let's be fair, there's nothing wrong with keeping Lucas Paqueta. And maybe, just maybe, West Ham should be pushing to keep him. We would accept 85 million. That's what I'm hearing. So even though that clause kicks in next season, which is he's got a buyout clause of 85 million next season, I know a lot of people are saying if you want to get him this season, you're going to have to pay more. I'm not sure Man City will, for the reasons that I suggested at the start of the video. I think they've shown in their negotiations with Declan Rice, they will not pay over the odds. So their initial bid was around 70 million mark, as I was led to understand. Their second bid was going to be just over 70 million, as I mentioned in yesterday's video. That's not going to cut it. West Ham will not accept anything. I was going to say they won't accept anything less than 85. I don't think that's true. I think if City offered 83 or something like that, the deal would probably get done. But 85 is roughly going to be the figure. That's going to get you Lucas Paqueta. It's just whether or not it happens. I think what is clear now, although this has not been said and it's not been leaked at all, is the whole Cole Palmer thing. I think if there was a chance that Man City were going to offer him in part exchange, I think it would have happened by now. It's quite an easy way for them to get the deal done. Manchester City have shown on numerous occasions they're prepared to let their young players go. I wonder if they're kicking themselves about Lavia, actually. I don't know. It's sort of like they sold him to Southampton and he proved himself within a season. Mind you, it's up to them. They had a buyback option, but, I mean, sort of, I guess, annoyingly for them, the buyback option is actually not until next season. Well, it's too late. Southampton sold him within one season, didn't they? So that's interesting. But my point is that it doesn't even matter if it's Lavia or Jadon Sancho or James Trafford or anybody else. Good goalkeeper, that, by the way. They've shown that they're prepared to sell their young players. In fact, Manchester City have just poached a youngster off of Leeds. I mean, sort of like 15, 16-year-old kid, something like that. Might have the age slightly wrong, but they've gone and poached, Leicester's best young player. So that's sort of what they do. And they're going on the Chelsea model. They've got a little conveyor belt there going of bringing these young players through and then selling them on and sort of making good money for themselves. But my point is, I think if there was an option to include Cole Palmer in the deal to get the player they really want, which is Lucas Paqueta, then they'd have done so by now. I can only assume that Cole Palmer doesn't want to come to West Ham. That's one assumption, to be fair. If you look at it from the other point of view, I've not seen anything in West Ham, in the way West Ham deal with their players and their signings to suggest that we would be interested in Cole Palmer. Now, I'm not talking about you and I'm talking about that David Moyes would want to go and sign this player. You cannot sign a player with that much promise, a player who looks ready for first-team football, and stick him in the under-21s. You just cannot do it. Look, Man City is a hard team to break into, but there are the majority of teams in the Premier League outside that top four, or whatever you want to call it, is getting into those teams. And when you're rumoured to have Brighton who are saying, "Look, we'll sign you and we'll put you in the team," we can't sign him. It's particularly not if he's a make weight in a deal. If we value Paqueta at say 85 million and they're going to value Cole Palmer at 25, we can't be sticking a player that's valued at 25 million. Into the under-21. He just needs to play. And I just haven't seen any indication that we would go and sign a player like that for the same reason that, we didn't go and didn't even bid for that Alex Scott. So the young, up-and-coming, promising players who haven't played any top-level football are just not going to be of interest for that sort of money. And that's why I think David Moyes, if he can't get Premier League experience, he certainly wants some experience. He's going to want whatever players he recruits to have played 150 games or something like that. I've made that figure up. What do I know about it? But yeah, it does seem to be 85 million, roughly, does seem to be the figure. That gets you Lucas Paqueta. I don't mind it dragging on in that respect if we get to keep him. I think the worst case scenario for us is it drags on, it gets to 2-3 days before the end of the transfer window, the deal gets done, and we haven't spent the money. And what money have we actually spent so far? I think we might have spent 60 million. I think that might be it. Is that Alvarez? Would that be about right? The signing of Alvarez and the signing of James Ward-Prowse? It's about that, isn't it? I'm not a million miles away from that. Well, that's, if you add in the Skamaka money, a little bit of Masuaku loose change down the back of the sofa, and the Vlasic money, we're nowhere near, we're not even half. We're not even half of what we've got to spend. So if you add Paqueta to that, the chances of us being able to spend and get a couple of players over the line in the last few days, last 2 days, the transfer window, I don't know about you, I'm sure like myself, you'd be quite nervous and not full of confidence that we'd be able to make those deals stick. Maybe, just maybe, we start looking into the reserves and start thinking, well, hold on a second, we've got that Jesse Lingard, who's training with us, maybe we'll sign him up on a contract. And that would just be, that would be a hard sell. For all concerned, it'd be a hard sell for the club to sell that to the fans, I think. And it would be quite hard for Lingard himself, really, because he'd have to be brilliant, wouldn't he? I mean, he'd have to score a goal in his first game, and he'd be doing all that. And I can't remember the thing he does. He's got a thing that he does. It's not that. That's terrible. That's just like a 50-year-old bloke trying to do whatever the cool thing is. It's certainly not that. And you know, he couldn't. Jesse Lingard couldn't sign for West Ham and then play a couple of games and stink the place out because there'd be not really been any tolerance for it because of the history of the whole situation. So it's a little bit of an odd one. We've got to sign players. We've got to sign good players. That being said, my choice would be to keep Lucas Paqueta. I think that would be a wonderful thing to do. I think we've still got 75 million to spend. No reason why we shouldn't keep Lucas Paqueta. We've got a couple of midfielders there. We've got money in the pot to go and sign another couple of players, whatever situation, whatever position you think that might be. One of those positions may well be left back. One of those players may well be Kieran Tierney. It's funny how I could say the Greek player's name the other day, but I couldn't say Kieran Tierney. There you go. We'll deal with that in another video. For the moment, Lucas Paqueta is still up for sale at £85 million. Sterling is the price.